everybody's doing good. A lot of people have been waiting for this video. I'm going to make a strong case with a ton of evidence of why this layout of a flat earth centered around the equator by the prime meridian is 1,000 times better than a North Pole centered AE map. I'm also going to show why it's more valid than a globe earth model. If you're not up to date with this model, you may want to go back and watch a couple short previous videos. A quick breakdown, you can just watch how the sun behaves on screen, but the top yellow circle is the Tropic of Cancer, the bottom yellow circle is the Tropic of Capricorn, and the red circle is the equator, and it can be drawn at the bottom or the top. Now I hear too many flat earthers repeating globers saying that the AE map is just a projection of the globe. Stop saying that. It is a projection of a celestial sphere, not a globe. And so I'm going to go ahead and get out the way why I believe the flat layout is more legitimate than the globe layout of the celestial sphere. Now, Shane St. Pierre, shout out to him, just did a video on the AE layout, and he actually gets it, but a lot of flat earthers do not, so you can go check out his video. Now, a lot of flat earthers will say that a map and a model is not important, and I feel like half of us wouldn't be here without something to at least visualize right off the rip. But if you can't represent your argument visually, then your stance is weak. So I feel like a basic correct layout with the correct directions to continents is very important, especially for moving forward in any kind of progression in this topic. So I believe I'll make a separate video against the globe model and why this is more legitimate, because I don't want this video to get too long. I have so much to cover. Now, for those out there who do not believe Jaron and Austin went and seen the 24-hour sun down south, which is ridiculous, I believe they did, but this is still an important model for the two counter-rotating star trails. So let's go ahead and dive in. So for those who believe in the biblical Enoch version with the gates in the east and in the west, this does not contradict that. I drew a bunch of straight rows of stars. I turned the dome upside down so as if we were looking up, and we get two full rotations, north and south. So it could even be working like that. This is what we get, and we would still see the stars doing circles in the north and in the south. Before I get too far, I want to cover the AE celestial sphere model. Okay, it uses the Haber sign, which is not using a globe, it's using a celestial sphere, but Haber sign means half sine. It means the sine, half the sine of an angle. And it uses two coplanar angles from the equatorial plane, from the center of the equatorial plane. So when you're using the AE map, it's egocentric, means it's centered around the person. But if you are claiming a globe, you're claiming you're doing the math from a place you didn't even get the measurements from. So that's why I say it's more legitimate on a plane. But there's so much to unpack with that. That's why I said I'll make a separate video. Now I got to make one more correction, and that's for people saying that latitudes are angles to Polaris. While it's true in the northern hemisphere, we can get almost half a degree accuracy using angles to Polaris. That's not the way the world's mapped out. It's mapped out from the equator, going north and south. So the latitudes are north and south from zero, the equator. And as you see on screen, with one of these ancient maps, they already had this figured out. They already had the separate rotations mapped out. A lot of people have probably seen this, which is Walter Bisland's flat earth model. And I'd like to ask him, why didn't you use a equatorial centered AE projection? But I think I know the answer. Because all the bendy light that the globers like to point out would be eliminated. There'd be slight little bends on the edges, and that's it. There wouldn't be a sun and stars directly behind you. So that's why he made this model using the projection. That's my opinion anyway. If we used an equatorial centered AE map, we'd get very slight bends, and only at the edges for the most part. It would match reality. Okay, a couple videos back on my channel, I put the video out, the one with Will Duffy not understanding the AE map. You get two poles. So when you center yourself at Antarctica, you see Australia, South America, and Africa on opposite sides. This eliminates so many problems. It eliminates the Sydney to Santiago distance problem. It eliminates the 24-hour sun problem. It eliminates the two star rotation problems. It does raise some questions though, so let's dive into some of them. So what if we're in this general area here or here and we traveled south? Well, we'd hit the ice wall, which would explain another question.
His most important exploration flights will now lack the powerful directional radio of the Mount Olympus. To get his men out, he must hope the icebreaker can crash her way back in time. Otherwise, he and his men will be frozen in for the 9 sunless months of the dark, treacherous Antarctic winter.
Well, the Antarctic is the only ocean that extends around the Earth, flowing into the 3 major oceans, Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian.
Beyond the South Pole, mapped 1/3 million square miles, never before seen by man.
Our eastern group mapped 3,000 miles of phantom coast and charted 40,000 square miles of coastal ocean areas hitherto unknown.
Our western group, flying hundreds of air hours, mapped the 4,000-mile Sunset Coast, made the amazing discovery of warm land in Antarctica.
So this would explain the vast expanse of land never seen with human eyes after he had been down there 4 times and mapped out the whole coastline in the interior of Antarctica. This would explain the 9 treacherous sunless months. This layout would perfectly explain the 4,000 miles of warm Antarctic coastline that's called Sunset Coast. It would also explain why they called it Sunset Coast, because the sun would set if it were over here in this area, and it would be warm over here in this area. So that's a lot of anomalies explained with this layout. But wait, there's more. So what do we see when we center ourselves between North America and Australia on Google Earth? It's almost like half a globe. It's just ocean, just pure water. And you see that red section there between South America and Australia, that's unclaimed Antarctic region. So there's so many things that would make sense with this model. And why would they have all that unclaimed Antarctic region? That would equate to this area over here, which, just like the equator, you got to project it to both sides. It would explain the dual pole rotations of the heavens being electric. Here on screen in this fluid, they put particles in there. You could see the current of the water. You have a north and a south pole, and they're making that exact pattern. You see they're making the pattern. They're naturally forming 2 rotations in that fluid. And here's more on the dipoles with the electric currents, the field lines. Everything about them screams. So it's no wonder they didn't give us this projection sooner.
Whoa, it's almost like we're standing on the surface of a giant spinning ball. Hey, how you doing?
You ever get tired of hearing that? I know I sure do. Because that's absolutely what we see. If we're standing in the north looking west, southwest, we see the stars start to straighten out and then start to curve the other way. But there's something they didn't account for, something they just kind of brush right past. If we're standing on the surface of a sphere, then there can't be any measurable separation. And there most certainly is measurable separation. You can measure it using an equatorial mount. You could go to stellarium, but we'll use something they can all relate to, sticks and shadows. We'll go to SunCalc to show the physical, measurable separation. Because remember, you can't have 2 separate directions simultaneously if we're the ones rotating. So I will pick the equinox for the date, and you see it goes straight overhead. And then I move up just a little bit north, and all of a sudden I get a smiley face. Then I move down a little bit past the equator, and I get a frown. So that's what a stick will show you in the ground. Your shadow will make a frown, a smiley face, and a straight face. That means it's measurable separation. That can't possibly work if we are the ones rotating, standing on a sphere. They didn't think that one through, did they? Next, I had people complaining about the distances. You see, from the port of Los Angeles to the port of Sydney, it's showing 18,400 nautical miles. Even going the long way, that doesn't work on a globe. But let's hear what they have to say.
From China to Western USA look like? Well, let me show you. First, the ship departs from Shanghai port in China, heading east. Now it's on the North Pacific Ocean, the ocean between the 2 nations. Finally, it arrives at port of Los Angeles in the United States. The transit time is about 20 days. What?
20 days? Good Lord! Google Earth shows 6,300 nautical miles. So it says the average speed is about 20 to 25 knots. So we'll just use the average 22.5 knots and see that comes out to about just about 26 miles per hour. So if we're going off 26 miles per hour, which is average, 20 days, 24 hours in a day, that's 12,384 miles. But I've heard they have these big container ships that can do it in like 11 days or something. So let's look at these other container ships. We're talking about 25, let's say 25 knots is about 29, almost 30 miles per hour. So even in 11 days, that's 7,800 miles. That's still like over 1,000 miles too far. This is kind of off the wall, but let's look at Amelia Earhart's route. Does it surprise anybody to find out she got lost after leaving the coast of Australia, heading east? We get a lot of flights missing down there in that area. And that doesn't surprise me. That's where the GPS would have to be wonky. So it's just more coincidence that kind of matches the model. Here's some more data showing that the equator and the tropics aren't parallel according to real world observation and measurements. Tree of Knowledge is who I got a lot of the field line little graphics from. He's had this model, he calls it the T model, and he's had this for quite some time. Other people, probably a couple other people have too. I've just made little slight alterations. I think we have a little wiggle room toward the edges. And it slightly expands the distances, but I've easily covered that base, you know. So from the lack of shipping routes, the lack of trade routes, the lack of flight paths over the Pacific, especially the South Pacific, from the unclaimed regions of Antarctica to Sunset Coast and miles of freaking warm, iceless Antarctic coastline, and all the other stuff I showed, I think it's safe to say it's better than a monopole AE map. Thank you for watching.